I'm going to call City Council to order for the joint meeting of Waynesboro City Council and Waynesboro School Board.
And I would like to call our Waynesboro School Board meeting joint with Waynesboro City Council today on January 13th at 7 p.m.
And I'll let Mr. Hammond start.
Okay, thank you, sir. Welcome, good evening, everybody. The municipal staff have prepared some slides to hopefully communicate the council's interest in modifying the funding formula, but also to provide some brief history on the lead up to this point, and then next steps, an agenda to guide our evening. So we'll spend a little bit of time on our current practice, current funding formula. We'll move into the proposed amendment to the formula. Hopefully that will prompt some conversation or questions, and then we'll look at next steps jointly. So a little bit of history. There's been a funding formula in place that has, for the most part, guided, if not outright determined, the funding that the municipal organization provides to public education in our community. The chart here illustrates about a 9-year history of the formula, and in 2017, we were at about just a little bit north of $14 million of local support for public education. And then in 26, we'll be just about $500,000 short of $21 million. And so over that amount of time, you can see appreciable growth, both in the number of dollars and percentage, and that percentage of growth exceeds by nearly twofold the rate of inflation controlled over that time. The formula was established in 2006. The documentation there on the municipal side are some pretty clear notes reflected in meeting minutes. In 2013, I think there were joint actions taken to amend the formula to address some debt issuance and debt considerations related to the Kate Collins Middle School project. I think Mr. McCormick now is going to spend some time on the details of how we determine, or how the formula funding agreement functions today.
Thank you.
So the handout passed out and then snipped on to the slideshow. Currently, the way that the funding formula works in practice is the way the formula addresses the revenues that'll be shared is it calls them discretionary revenues. And so what Vonda and I do is we go through the accounting query and pull out each and every one of them. Well, in reality, those items tie to the back of our audited comprehensive financial statement each year. And so what I've done is work through 1 and 2 on the sheet in front of you, which one is what is posted up there, just corresponds to a position in the audited financial report, so that anyone can take those, instead of going through the accounting query, can take those to the back of the ACFR and say, okay, what are total general property taxes for the year? What were total other local taxes? Minus the business license taxes, and then what's the non-categorical aid from the Commonwealth reduced by certain items. This makes it so that in a quick reference, we're taking what we do in practice and making it so that it's in the resolution specifically versus just called discretionary revenue, and that way there's no confusion in what actually gets pulled into the sharing formula. Then the next section, section 2, these are the items that we've gone through over the years. All of these are the current withholdings from the formula. It does the same thing. It works through and spells out more explicitly in an exhibit that would be adopted by council to say, okay, R1 is a portion of the 2018 tax increase for the tax rate for the Waynesboro schools debt. R2, we actually had to do that increase in 2 phases. R3, I wrote a little bit different, the value of the Nature's Crossing debt reserve or the payment related to, so we wouldn't have to come back and touch it again. Basically, once that debt reserve gets built to the amount of the payment, it'll just default to whatever ends up being borrowed. R4 is, again, any economic development tax incentives, and this is current practice. That number actually correlates to a note in the financial statements. And then R5 is the value of the school debt reserve for the new addition to the high school, or the payment related to that once the renovation debt has been issued. That comes up with a withholdings calculation, and then you come to the final calculation, which is where the current formula ends in number 3, which is the base calculation in number 1 minus the withholdings calculation times the 42.5% shared revenue.
Are there questions, or shall we keep going?
I think you're.
Just a quick question. So you're able to change the various types of withholdings that's taken off the top of the line prior to the application of the funding formula?
Yes.
Okay. So how are those withholdings then accounted for as far as received revenue or credits after the application of the 42.5%?
They would go to fund whatever the item that's called out is. So, for example, if you take the economic development tax incentives, those funds went to pay the company that you had the economic development incentive with, or the debt reserve would go. Another example would be the school debt reserve or the Nature's Crossing debt reserve. The Nature's Crossing debt reserve goes to our CIP plan to fund the Nature's Crossing project. The school goes to our bond fund, because we have to issue the debt. It's our bond fund to work on the high school project. Or the 1 and 2 go to pay the debt payment that's currently outstanding for the first phase of the high school.
So when those debts then fall off, when there's nothing, when the titles are clear, at that point, how is the revenue then redistributed back?
We would just go back into the formula. So the way that I wrote it was to show the debt or the amount of the debt. So once the debt falls off, it would come back into the discretionary revenue. We've had things like probably the most obvious example is the town center issuance with the where Target is currently. That was a big economic development incentive that came off for a number of years. I think it may have been 10. And once we stopped giving that incentive to the taxpayer, it fell back into the formula and was distributed once those revenues were collected.
Okay, thank you.
Out of curiosity about do you know about when those fell off?
And since I've been here, 2021, 2020 maybe, I could go look. I don't have the full formula handy, but I could go look and send that
It
out.
just seems like it aligns with when our funding increased.
Yeah, it would have been. Yeah,
So without that debt
2019,
service, our numbers would have been higher to start with, right?
I'm sorry.
Or without that incentive, our numbers would have been higher to start with?
If it had not been included and we had collected those revenue, but then not included the incentive, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, just want to make sure I was saying it right. Thank you.
2020.
Okay. So what does the council contemplate doing? So the proposed amendment would establish a maximum increase of an amount of 3% per annum per year. The modification would limit the year-over-year increase. And just as a note, we do not foresee that the modification would impact revenues on an annual basis. In fact, the projections that we've done for 2027, fiscal 2027, the 3% maximum increase would not be triggered, so the schools would realize the full benefit of the revenue increase as dictated or prescribed under the formula. I would, as a suggestion, as we work through consideration of the proposed amendment, I think it would be worthwhile to, at a minimum, renew and formalize and have both bodies endorse the current practice for funding formula as a basis, given the time that's passed since the formula was established and given the fact that I don't think anybody present at the table was serving in an elected capacity when the formula was established, but I might be wrong about that. So I've covered kind of the what of the proposed amendment. So perhaps it would be helpful to understand why, and I think council seeks to create additional capacity in the general fund for municipal investment that would be capital or operational without having to necessarily contemplate and satisfy obligation to increase school funding. This would, as a matter of process, create some independent consideration of municipal need. Why now? I think that there's a significant positive momentum both within the public school organization and on the municipal side of service to the community. Council has affirmed and committed to issuing debt to complete the high school project. When we do that, or when the council does that with the royal we, that will be, we estimate, probably a $60 million dollar project, which will be the largest capital investment and debt issuance in the history of our community. The city has maintained over the last several decades real estate tax rates among the lowest among the 38 municipalities in Virginia. While municipal organizations provide an affordable quality of life, the current funding arrangement prevents the council from considering strategic investment for exclusive benefit of city operation without implication of school funding. I would note also during the recent period, both the schools and municipal organizations have been able to make strategic investment to improve operation and service to their constituents, and also to improve our respective labor or our positions in the labor market, recognizing the challenges that the schools have to attract and retain qualified or exceptional teachers, and similar challenges that we face on the municipal side, attracting public safety, public works, and essential municipal employees. So all that to say, I think there is significant positive momentum in both organizations, and the history of increase. I think that the amendment is intended to curb those increases, again, to create additional capacity and the process of being able to consider independently needs in the municipality. I would emphasize and note that over the last 10 or 11 years, a retrospective look at the proposed amendment the limit would have been triggered, I think, 6 times, one of which was a nominal impact of about $7,000. The remaining 5 times, I think the difference would have been just short of $500,000, which I acknowledge is more than nominal. I think that's what I have on the proposed.
May I have a question on that, please? So with that, you're saying that on an impact on 2027, we are 2 years post your data. So what was when will you know 2028, the impact on that? Do you already know, or when will you know?
No, because the formula is based on the audited the annual comprehensive financial report for both the city and the schools. The formula runs off of known data, and we won't know that until we complete the 26 audit.
When is that?
We get those numbers in November-ish, November of 26, December of 26.
So I guess my question would then be, if we take part in the debt payoff by it coming off of the top of the discretionary fund prior to the 42.5% is applied, would it not also be fair to share in the revenues of those debt payoffs once they have been paid off and they can be applied fully to the discretionary fund?
If I'm understanding your question, I think the answer is that that's the way it works now. Once those debts are satisfied or those economic development incentives are satisfied, that revenue returns into those discretionary funds, which are distributed at 42.5%. So
Right, but if it's increased revenue based off of property, real estate growth, and that extra then funding from year over year, that also is coming from the discretionary fund, correct?
Correct.
So with a cap, we wouldn't then be realizing the actual full impact of those revenue growths based off of the real estate that's fallen off the debt services.
I was with you until the last sentence.
So if you are realizing increase year over year, that goes straight into the discretionary fund, it no longer is falling off from the debt services because it's been paid off. So right now, you're just realizing actual revenue from the increased real estate growth. If the cap is then applied after the 42.5%, you're not actually realizing all of the true revenue that's been generated from those properties because you're not getting that year-over-year actualization.
Question makes sense.
I think that, assuming that the increases in revenue values exceed, whatever, a 3% increase of the previous year, then your statement is true. That's correct.
Well, that's also operating under the assumption that the city council doesn't modify the tax rate to accommodate the citizens to reduce their burden for personal property taxes, and so forth. So kind of, that's also assuming that we don't look at that and say, we have another $2 million coming in, there's no big items on the line, we're gonna not raise, tax rates by 5 or 6 cents, but, utilize those funds and maintain or even reduce tax rates from when we raise them up. So
I definitely see that point, and even to you all's point that you've made, being able to keep the tax rate at the lowest in the Commonwealth, even if you do raise it, you're still amongst the lowest, and that realization can still be increased by, I mean, for the sake of argument, $500,000 annually. And at that rate, you're still possibly susceptible to the 3% cap. If I'm looking at the school increase funding correct, anything above 500,000 would then be susceptible to that 3% cap.
well, that's a rolling number too, because with the increase in evaluations, that number is going to continue to increase.
Right, so the year-over-year increase will then subsequently follow. So that 3% catches more as the valuation
Sorry.
and as the increase grow. And then with inflation as well, at 2.7% currently, the buying power of that actual increase then is shrunk. So the 3% cap is almost break, at the best, in some years, current service level funding. At the worst, a cut. Or
But
for lack of,
it would be less increases, not a cut. It's
For-
still more money year over year.
so for lack of semantics, it will be a reduction.
And what it would be. And I think
Because
that's,
it's not keeping pace with inflation.
I think we could
but-
speculate, because all of that speculation
Yeah.
on what a future council school board do. I want to note that since this formula has been in place, correct me, Mike, tax rates have decreased, stabilized. The council will at different times, while the formula's been in place, has changed at different times. We all know tax rate is a big deal in Waynesboro. So we've rode that wave with you guys regardless of what you've decided to do for tax rates. So to speculate what would happen in the future based on saying take this limitation cut, whatever you want to title it, is still saying that we're going to be limited, where you're not going to be limited, where we have not been limited in the past. We have rode with you guys. Whatever council's will is for a tax rate, we've gone with. So to say that we should take this because of we don't know the future tax rate, I think is kind of a miss, personally.
I don't think that that's what we're putting forward at all. What I had put forward, and if anybody had listened to any of the conversations we had while we were doing budget proposals, the city side of it, from the city employees, have had years where their pays have been frozen, where they've had positions frozen, and haven't seen the growth that the school system has. All right, so when we were going through the budget session this time, and there were, equalization is always the, same rate, slight increase, but Basically, we don't want to impact the citizens with more taxes. Obviously, there were holes and there were gaps, and there are certain things coming on the horizon that are gonna have to be addressed. One of the big ones is the high school, which is gonna be a $3 million a year debt payment. Absolutely has to be done. That aside, we had positions in the fire department, we had positions in the police department, we had the sheriff's office that hasn't been staffed with a full-time sheriff on the city's dime ever. I think in 30 some odd years, I think we did 2 or 4 part-time positions to fill the coverage of the doors. Emergency services, volunteerism is gone. So we're having to foot the bill for, not foot the bill, but having to supplement the income of what was once a majority volunteer and donation-driven service. So when we're looking at that and we're looking at, okay, there's $4 or $5 million worth of items that need to be addressed because they have been let go for so long and not supplemented the way that the school system has. And riding the wave with it, and Waynesboro's kept their taxes low, the school system has seen, 8, 4, 7, 5, 4, 2% increases year over year over the past 5 or 6 years. The city workers and the city employees haven't seen that. So us seeing that needed to be addressed, it was a struggle, all right? And we worked and really ground it out to try to come to some type of understanding that we can't do everything. But we wanted to be able to address those issues without doubling down. So $5.5 million worth of revenue was taxed on the residents of Waynesboro for those items. And I wanted to safeguard against the necessity to make that $7.5 million just because the formula says so.
If I may, for a moment, what you're describing is what we learned because Terry and I went through the comprehensive process together when I first started in 2017. And what you're describing is what we learned is a direct result of not collecting enough in real estate taxes. And I even asked the question in one of our joint sessions a few years ago because we learned that most localities collect about 60% and then 40% in sales and meals taxes, and we're the exact opposite. And so I asked, did we have any plan to move the needle on that and get to a place where we're collecting enough? Because this is how you pay for services, really. It's through the taxes. And just because we are fiscally responsible doesn't mean we should bear the brunt of there not being enough revenue collected through the real estate taxes.
What were you gonna say, Nigel?
Well, I think no one here would disagree that emergency services and public works is not a crucial part of the discussion. They are. I think it's also important to note that we also don't hold the purse. And that if you are the revenue generating body, I guess my question would then become is, what has the plan been to cook in those revenues and reserve funds to then allocate to services such as these? Whether it be a CIP or anything of that nature.
I would argue that there really hasn't been. I think there has been a effort on this council and previous councils to satisfy the citizens' desire for a lower tax rate. And in doing so, there are municipal projects that have to take a back seat. This allows us to address those municipal projects because in my opinion, it is a collaborative effort to improve the schools, which we are committed to do, but also to address other municipal projects within the city. And that should not, and I think one of my colleagues said that, be on totally on the backs of the citizens by raising taxes to do that. So I think that we all have to make concessions to do that, to get that done.
I do want to point out that we invest through that top end that comes out. We have invested over $4 million into those tax rebates. And therefore, we are investing into the same properties that you all are. And when those increase, our investments are increasing as well because we have put in that money as well and sacrificed on that end for the schools. So I feel like we are putting our piece into that pie for Waynesboro as well when it comes to funding that comes out of that fund. I just want to put that out there. But with that, do you all have more for your presentation?
No, ma'am.
Okay, with that, would you mind if Dr. Castle and Dr. Barber present something as well?
Sure.
Thank you. And I really like that you use the word collaboration because I like the idea of collaborating. And I know that Mr. Short talked about that in a 2-on-2 meeting. And I feel like if collaboration is the true way we want to move forward, that instead of thinking of resolutions quickly, maybe having more of these conversations on what the numbers and compromise looks like, maybe a couple months, and then maybe come back to that. And the floor is yours.
I wanted to start by talking about enrollment. Over the last year, during calendar year 2025, Dr. Barber and I were invited to present to City Council and to this, Planning Commission and to this group. There seemed to be an idea that schools were becoming overcrowded or at capacity, which, as you can see, we are having a slight trend up, but since 2020, 2021, our enrollment has been somewhere between 3,000 and 3,093 currently. So it's pretty stable, although trending up a bit. We do have capacity in our buildings. Depending on where you go and look on DOE, the Department of Ed reports attendance differently. They'll report attendance for K-12, which is probably in the 2,900, 2,800. They report pre-K students, which are 3 to 4-year-olds in other locations, and that's about 240 students. There's another group of students who are highly needed intensive support. And those students are in a variety of specialized programs that are funded differently and are not included in that K-12 traditional ADM. There's about 80 of those students. I would point out that 10 years ago there were 13, and we now find that we have 80. So our enrollment has been steady. The next slide, if I could, please. Ms. Hutchinson took, I believe, the sheet that Cameron has referenced, Mr. Cormick has referenced, and the revenue of the city being the top line, the city division being the red line, and the green being the school division share. We did look up and found that 2.7% inflation for 2025 is the lowest it's been in 5 years. If you go back to 2021, I believe it was 7.5%. Cumulatively over the last 5 years, the rate of inflation has been 22.5%. And so, as you know, that's the cost of doing business and the cost of running the household and living. So our expenses go up. Everything that Mr. Hamp and council members have talked about, I can reiterate for the school system. We have projects that have been put off. We currently have failing heating systems in 2 of our buildings that will be over $1 million each to repair. It costs a lot to do those kinds of things. I think a couple of points that I would also point out, to Ms. Lipscomb's point, the economic development incentives that have been given over the years totaled over $9 million, right around $9 million, just a shade over. That comes off before we apply the formula. If you apply the 42.5%, that's $4.2 million that would have come to the school that was invested in that economic development of business and industry. That's been successful. Good for you. It's working. But when that revenue comes back in, to Ms. Lipscomb's point, I have to repeat, we've invested in it and feel like we should reap the benefits of that investment in that. I'll speak to just a minute of debt service. And throughout our conversations over the last few years of debt service and operations, we have said repeatedly, we just can't do this project if it's gonna cut and reduce operations. We have to pay our teachers, we have to have curriculum, we've gotta have utilities and run school nutrition, and it's about people in the building are teaching and about the materials and supplies. We can continue to do a good job in the building. That's really not acceptable. A brand new building with new windows and nice heat and everything that works is great. But if we don't have the money to put the people in it and run it, it's not gonna be a good school system. I would really encourage you to try to keep operating and capital separate. Having said that, Cameron can confirm these and go back. In many localities, municipalities, counties, Augusta County is a great example, or cities, there is a set amount of the tax rate that goes to school debt service. And as a school debt is paid off, which since FY10 we've paid off Westwood, William Perry, part of Cape Collins, some renovation at Wayne Hills, and the renovation in 2020 at Waynesboro High School. So there was some sense of the debt service going to those. Many localities, that would have just gone into a reserve fund, and that is the money that goes to school debt. And that fund would have built up, so now when we take on the high school, we could have paid cash for some of that, and it wouldn't have that impact. So, and this is your all's decision, or past councils. I believe if you went back that far, probably 12 cents of the tax rate was going to school debt service. I don't believe it's at 12 cents now. I think it's probably closer to 8 cents right now. So my point being, the amount of the tax rate that goes to school debt service is always going to be there, because you've always got to maintain your schools. And it just costs money. It's like maintaining your house. And so I understand that we may require additional tax dollars, but I think to Mr. Stewart's point maybe earlier is some of those cents that were going to school debt dropped off, were used for other things. We enjoyed 42.5% of that. Now it's time to come back and pay those. I'll make one other observation about funding. And that's around per pupil costs, which we've not heard about, but I feel like I need to address this because we do hear about it from time to time. Like enrollment, you can go to the Department of Education and find different numbers for per pupil expenditure, whether that's just K-12, whether that's all students. One of the things that's misleading is a common place to look at within the Department of Ed is Table 15, which reports local, state, and federal broken out. The local part, however, if it's not state and it's not federal, the Department of Ed views it as local. So that's not just tax dollars from the city council. That's not just allocation. It's also money that we as a school division generate ourselves. Our Medicaid reimbursement will be over $300,000 this year. There's E-rate reimbursements and others that show up under that local, but we generated. If we receive grants that don't come from the Department of Ed, for example, a grant from the Opioid Abatement Authority, that shows up under the local contribution because it's not state and it's not federal. And so that local number, when we frankly work hard and get grants, becomes inflated on a per pupil basis. The other thing that gets that is sometimes the state, the Virginia Literacy Act, which you may have heard about or remember 3 or 4 years ago, had a couple $1 million, but you had 3 years to spend it. Well, if the state budgets it to you in one fiscal year, and we have 3 years to spend it, if we don't spend it that first year, it comes off of their record as us having gotten it. But we're holding that money and spending it over the next 2 years, spreading it out, and that then shows up on their reports as local. So that local number gets somewhat inflated. I actually took the $20,677,000 is the city contribution for this year, divided that by our 3,090 students, and came up with a number. Mr. Barber, we had a number, 6,685. We do have a folder of information to give with you tonight. In that also, and I would point out that is in an average of our surrounding school divisions. If you also go to the Virginia Auditor of Public Accounts, which is where the city audit is submitted, is that right, Mr. Foreman? As well as the school board audit and the school portion of the audited financial. The Auditor of Public Accounts also generates a report that's quite reliable and encompasses everything, that shows the spending of each locality. And so we've provided that, and we're not above, we're not below, we're in our, in the range for our region. Barbara, did I leave anything out of those 2 slides that I needed to talk about?
I don't think so. I think the only other thing that I might add is, so Dr. Castle said, right now, if you go to the Virginia Department of Education website and look at our enrollment, it says 3,013 students when you include all of our students for our ADM. There are 80 students right now who are funded differently because they have intensive support needs. We are so proud of our students. Our enrollment in specialized programs, the narrative that they're decreasing enrollment is just not accurate. So, for example, at the beginning of this graph in 2012, there were 279 students who were identified as students with disabilities. Right now, Ms. Burks and her team of amazing special educators are 408 students. So a significant increase over that period of time. English language learners, we had 154 students back in 2012. Right now, exactly 400 students are speaking a language other than English. We're up to 16 different languages, and providing supports instructionally is our honor, but also a challenge and resource intensive.
Translation services are quite expensive for our communications with parents and within the building with those students.
The Virginia Department of Education has started counting students with interrupted schooling. So students who have moved here to Waynesboro and have a gap in their educational experience. So for example, they might have left Honduras in 2nd grade and instruction stopped there. And now they're in Waynesboro and they're enrolling in 10th grade at Waynesboro High School. And the level of need that those students have is significant. There are 37 students right now who are in that similar space. Our Governor's School students, back in 2012, 18 students went to the Governor's School. We have 39 students enrolled right now. Valley Career and Tech, 42 students went in 2012, 81 students are going now. And then this is an important part. I think, and I think it goes to the part that you guys are talking about. The needs of the community are significant. 42 students were experiencing homelessness in 2012. 106 students as of today are experiencing homelessness and are attending our schools. So the narrative that our enrollment is declining is inaccurate. I would say the enrollment in specialized programs is increasing significantly, and all of these specialized programs are resource intensive, and we have to hire people. This is not optional. We We have to make it work for all of these groups because of state and federal law.
One example of that would be our students experiencing homelessness by federal law. If they move into an adjoining school division, they can stay at their home school, and many choose to. So we go pick them up wherever they are and take them home at the end of the day. We have a number of students in programs, again, by either state or federal law, from Harrisonburg to Lexington to Charlottesville. So you see our vans, we've got a parking lot full of vans, and the parking lot's empty at 7 a.m. and again in the afternoon because we're transporting students to all those. So much like the city, we are a reflection of the city. Our needs have changed over the last decade, and I would say at an exaggerated amount since 2021 with COVID, it seems. And therefore our services and just the overall expense of all of those likewise. So I would just ask you flip back one time, Dr. Barber, to, the red line's going up a little faster than the green line, but it should because that's 67.5%, and we have 42.5. I'm fine with 42.5. Our expenses are increasing as well. So I'll leave that where we are. I believe, based on my calculation, that this year's current, I would make this final point. Our allocation based on this formula for the budget we're doing for FY '27 is 2.7%, which matches inflation for 2025. That's the lowest rate of inflation we've had in 5 years. So I'd like to think it keeps going down, but inflation goes back up to 5 or 6%. 3% increase doesn't even cover our inflationary costs.
So another point I would like to point out as well is with your presentation letting us know that this is not impacting funding for 2027, I feel like it would be due diligence to continue these type of conversations as a whole in joint meetings or 2-on-2 sessions and push back a vote on a proposed change and give this really good detailed thought as a collaboration of two entities that service our Waynesboro residents.
And I think what would be even more in support of that would be if we could have a third party come in to evaluate the efficiency of which we are currently funded and the support that you all receive and may need, that could then point to what is a balanced proposal for this moving forward.
Nigel, what would be the suggested third party?
I think we could all come to an agree on one. There's not one that comes to mind now.
There are groups that do that, much like I don't believe I've been in the meetings. The city has engaged the services of a group to help develop the comprehensive plan, correct? Out of Charlottesville, I believe. And so there are groups that do that kind of efficiency studies for school divisions and presumably cities as well.
Can we assume that's what other localities do as the due diligence steps before making these decisions?
Certainly. If you can guide me to specifics of it,
No,
I'll look at that.
I'm wondering, I know we all want to be mindful, and I don't want to simplify it, but I prefer to try to keep it simple. Like, y'all's bills are increasing. We all want a well-funded city. We want emergency services. We want all the things. I don't want my tax rate to go up personally. But I feel like we all need to make sure we're doing our due diligence so that the school's bills and the city's bills, we're not making assumptions, that we go about this as collaborative bodies working together. Because this kind of, I know the conversation has been had over the last year. I know we've talked about this. We've had 2-on-2s, but we've not had this full conversation. So before we push something that kind of feels like shoving it across the finish line without due diligence and conversation, I think we owe it to the citizens and to those who have elected us to make sure we do all the steps necessary. I, as a school board member, would like to be able to say that if we need to do this to pay all the bills and we're overspending or whatever the question, I don't feel like you're questioning our expenses or how we spend money. we all have bills to pay, and I just feel like we need to make sure we're on the same page and that it's not, I'm curious where the 3% came from. Like, how did we get to that as the cap? Like, how do we back into the numbers to say this is enough for y'all?
I mean, I venture to say it's because we kind of looked back at the 10-year history, and, you know, you have lows as low as 1% or just below 1%, but you have the one giant jump, which is about 9%, 8.9, in
Did y'all take
2020.
into consideration the economic incentive rebate that?
So,
y'all-
but that economic incentive rebate is tax money that we give to to a company for coming in. We don't get any of that money. It's not like,
No,
we got
I
60,
realize
68
that, but it's
or
still a part of the
58%.
formula once received, so.
yeah, so you got, as soon as it rolls back in, that's 42%,
Mr. Sloat, can you tell me the year of that one again?
2020. It was our audit year of 2020, your 2022 budget.
And I
Didn't
think-
we
Mr.
do
Hand,
level
would that have
funding in
been,
2020?
if I might,
Sorry, go ahead, Dr. Castle.
would that have been the year that, during COVID, we did not get our allocation of whatever the amount was? In collaborative nature, we said, sure, we understand, but then that was appropriated to us the following year. Would that have been the year?
That was budget year 2021 because of the way the budget we were working on.
Okay,
So that March of 2020 was
Just a
when
particularly good
everything
year.
happened, budget year 2021, and then once we got through budget year 2021, that's what we were talking about. I think we reappropriated those funds where we
I
held
just
it
wanted
flat.
to
I think we
be sure.
reappropriated those funds in 22 or 23.
I don't remember.
Which would balance it out to those 2 years being at 5%, because it was 10% between the 2 years.
Yeah.
But, you know, 4%, 7%, and keeping in mind that those percentages were also affected by tax rates and revenue being, you know, revenue being increased, tax rates being lowered because revenue was increased, you know, the different fluctuations.
I don't
Could
think
that
we
be from-
reallocate.
Hold on, can I have a quick- Could that be because of like PGI, Lumos, WTA, TC rebates, all of those dropped off right about those times? Could that have helped with that increase?
That would be additional revenue.
Yeah.
May have been an assessment year, if I'm recalling that right. My years are running together a bit, so but there was a reassessment that generated pretty significant additional revenue some point in there, but I'm speculating. Mr. McCormick knows the answer. He doesn't know it right now. He can find it for us.
Years, so 2020, 2022, 2024, 2026 is when that.
Yeah.
'cause we
But
just
again,
generated
that would open up
reassessments.
that opportunity to have that conversation, to look at that data like you're talking about and see what are the outliers
Well,
versus,
And the other carryover to that would be that with the 3% max, if for some reason 1 year was 5% and you were held to 3, but the next year was 2%, you would get 3, and the next year was 2%, you would get 3, because it would, that fund amount is still in there. And that's, you know, conversations, you know, we can have about, and if I'm not mistaken, because the volume would still be increased.
If you based it on the previous year's formula versus the previous year's appropriation, yeah.
Say that again? I'm sorry.
So it depends what number you use as the base. So if you use the appropriation as the base, those numbers wouldn't pull in. If you use the previous year's formula as the base, those.
Which way are y'all proposing for your resolution, since this is how you're going about it?
I think it's currently written as appropriation, but that,
Because the appropriation can be different than what we come up with the resolution if it's restricted by, what we come up with, correct? So the formula would say 5%, but then we appropriate 3%. If we go on the formula from the previous year, it would still have the volume greater than what we actually allocated. So that would fall into bringing them back up to another 3% potentially.
I think to that point, like, just as you guys clarify that among yourselves, is more reason of why can we not continue these conversations to make sure there's clarity and understanding? Just for you guys to talk that out right now, let's make sure we're clear. How do y'all feel? So we're gonna stay, we obviously don't want less funding. I know you guys say it's not a cut, we don't want a cap or a limit. You guys need to do what you need to do. We're saying, can we take another due diligence step and have a third party? They're saying there's people that specialize in this to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to as a locality. How does that sit with you guys? Are you?
I
as a
think we
body
were all
opposed?
elected. I mean, personally, I think we were all elected to make these decisions. These guys are our parties are instructors that we go to for the information that we need to make educated decisions, as I'm sure you guys have your leadership that you go to for your numbers and to figure that out. So I have full trust and faith in our leadership to help us come to an agreement with you guys. I don't think we need a separate outside third party. We already have, yearly audits and assessments that they go through, just to make sure they're spending money properly and whatnot, but
I don't think it's a lack of trust or competency. I think it's more like, I mean, to everyone's point, we are elected to make sound decisions, but it wouldn't hurt to make a vote or a decision based off of outside perspective on factors that might not have been taken into consideration with current staff, our side or your side. I think outside opinions always see things that we might not see. I mean, respectfully, both of our admins have been in their roles for a significantly long time. Sometimes you see things, just like a smell, you become nose blind to something. I think it's important that when you have someone with a fresh pair of eyes and a nose that can smell a fresh smell, you're able to better indicate what you see and what you smell that might not be fully what you want to make a decision on.
And I just want to reiterate the fact that, like with that conversation you all were having now, I feel like those still need to happen with us conjoined, whether that be 2-on-2s or a joint meeting like we're doing now, prior to the official vote on your end. If you could give us that due diligence and respect as the collaborative party that Mr. Short talked about wanting to have, and I feel like you all want to have that as well. And I feel like that would help with the citizens as well, knowing that this was truly thought about, collaborated, and discussed, and looked at the numbers and looked at the outliers to find all the facts, like you were just saying, to make that conclusion that betters our city as well.
And even in conjunction to an outside perspective, I don't think it would be unbeneficial for us to continue these dialogues, whether it is joint 2-on-2s or whether we meet individually. I think those conversations should still happen. I don't think we should cease communication in lieu of a third party. I think it's still beneficial for us to just at least talk about the figures and the process together. So that way, no one's thrown off guard when something happens. We can then be in agreement, like, okay, based off of what we talked about, based off of what they've presented, I think we can then meet in a middle based off of those two perspectives and then make that sound decision that everyone voted for us to be here to do.
So I think that I've heard a lot, and I can appreciate what I've heard. As an elected official, we have been given the task of growing this city and growing this city in a way that would be beneficial to all involved. I do not agree with a third party. We were elected to govern, and we intend to govern. So I would not accept any third party mediation, whatever that would entail.
I would respectfully just sort of chime in that I would agree with that position, and principally on the fact that we've got, a singular proposal that we shared this evening, got some other ideas, and, I think we would like to give you all the space and time necessary to come up with a counter proposal, right? So why would I bring a mediator in when I have no alternative counter proposal to consider and to review? I think Dr. Castle served up the per pupil neatly and nicely, so local contributions, what was that, $6,000 per student, per pupil, is, to challenge you all to go back and sort of consider what is the number. So what is that number that is required in order to yield an even stronger outcome for our community and public education? Because it can't be infinity, right? And I think hopefully everybody can shake their head in that. It can't be infinity. So if it's $6,000, then what's that number? And then let's back into, almost look at from the perspective of a capital plan. What do we want to grow into? What services do we want to provide? What are the strategies that you all want to employ with, you know, I have deep appreciation for the cohort survival nature of academia and the student population and the challenges that can present and the wide variety and swings of cost. But I would echo the mayor in that I would like to hear a counter proposal to consider before, because I don't think there's a problem. I mean, you know, in our collaboration, you know, we're all neighbors, so I got no problem just continue the conversation. We do 2-on-2s, you know, meet every month. I'm cool with that. Whatever.
I feel like
have
what
it
you
in
just
there.
said, Mr. Short, just reiterated the fact that I feel like you're in alignment that this conversation needs to continue to happen versus getting a vote next week or in the future, like near future. I feel like that's kind of what you're pointing at, that this needs to be pushed back further because those conversations and what ifs and counter proposals need to kind of happen.
Yeah, and well, I would also just respectfully offer that that has to be on a fixed timeline as well, right? So, recognizing that the ideas only were sort of maturing, I guess, around the October timeframe, but from October to January 13th, I've heard nothing. So, you know, I would lean on establishing, you know, begin with the end in mind. So decide the date that we're gonna pick to come to resolution. Is it April 1? Cool, because this isn't really complicated thing. It's not hard math, right? So April 1, let's back into what does that collaboration look like? Are there 2-on-2s, whatever, full groups, whatever's required? But I mean, we really stressed with you know our you know fire department staff this last round of like, you know, when we have to raise 2 cents in order to make that to add to our labor pool in order to provide for the growth and services that are in there. Well, we know we also have to count for an extra penny because of the agreement, even though, again, my time on council, I can't, it's been a while, and that's on all of us, so I'm not throwing darts at anybody, but, you know, in 9 years, I think it's probably been 7 since since we received a presentation, right? On what your needs are, where your growth is. And I personally believe it's kind of crazy that's where I'm on an island with the per pupil, I get it. But you know, it's crazy to me that we predicate the needs and services that our community and our children deserve based off of a number that swings. You know, the last 5 years, you've averaged a 6.5% pay raise every single year for the last 5 years. The 5 years prior to that, it was 2.25%, 2.4%. So the spread is normalizing at 3% seems like a pretty fair settlement, you know, or a starting point in the conversation. So that's why I would respectfully ask for some feedback on, if you don't love that, then where else did we go with that? And again, that's where I go back to the per pupil is we'll figure out it's not infinity. So if it's $7,000, how does that affect what the rate ought to be? Is it $8,000? Is it $20,000? You know, how do you scale that?
Yeah, and I
Mr.
think
Short,
having,
I would say, and this is part of the point of having discussions, I would tell you, I don't believe we've given 6.5% each year for the last 5 years. I don't recall giving 6% raises, and there were some years we didn't give.
I didn't say
any more.
raises, I'd say, but the school division has received a 6.5% pay rate for the last, on average, over the last 5 years.
Oh, you mean
you
additional
talking
funding,
about-
not pay
Additional
raise?
funding.
I thought when you said pay raise, you were.
I was saying, no,
referring to
not-
compensation.
Yeah, that's what I was
Pockets.
wondering. I'm like, I think the state
That
taxes
would
are
be
subsidized.
great. That would be, I saw
People are like,
folks
"Where's
sort of
my
patting their
paycheck?"
front pockets. No.
So I'm gonna say. Yeah.
No, but
Yeah,
as
you're about to
a,
get me in trouble with
as
some
an,
people here.
as an organizational, to simplify
agree.
it, it's a 6.5% pay raise for the last
And I
5
say
years on
kudos to the
average.
city for that growth
2%,
happening.
2.25% the 5 years
Inflation.
prior, so.
I have a question, Terry.
Yeah.
So, from what you guys said, this doesn't, if your cap went into place, it doesn't affect the current budget year that we're working on for fiscal year 27, right? What you're in? Like, for
Yes,
whatever
that's
you-
what the city believes.
Okay, so.
We agree.
Okay, so since your staff and our staff right now are in budget cycle, there's a lot of time, so you said April 1 is an example. Since there's not an effect right now, I just want us to be mindful of that timeline to not rush to a resolution. Just to make sure we're diligent. And I don't have a problem with April if the body doesn't, but I just want us to be mindful, like, we have no choice but to go with what you guys resolve to do. But to give us time while there's other priorities going on, our staff need to focus on the things that they're focused on, so I don't want to add extra. We have to be diligent about their workload too. I want to make sure they do everything we need to make sure we're prepared to collaborate with y'all on a good faith effort.
Like maybe after the budget season.
Yeah, like I don't, just for me, in a supervisory perspective, I don't want to add this load. And so I want us to be mindful of the timeline. Whether you guys say April, you're the ones that hold the control over this situation. For your staff and our staff, let's be mindful of the workload they currently carry.
Yeah,
This
I
is
feel like-
the
and it gives us some
also
time
with
to have
all of
open
us in our budget
public sessions.
discussions, to where we keep an open dialogue
Mm-hmm.
between us to let us know where you're at through your budget process as we do to help adjust those numbers and be able to look and get a more definite, where our definite needs are and what we can do to help each other,
Mm-hmm.
help us, help you, help the taxpayer.
Yeah, I think setting up a end goal, I think is a good idea, and it gets us able to make a timeline, and it gives opportunities for the public to come to our meetings and be able to speak about how they feel. Same thing for you all at your meetings, and allows them to give us their opinions on things that we need to maybe dive into and look at. And I just think that gives due diligence for them as well to process. So I think giving us a timeline would help.
And so my interest in a spring sort of conclusion, if you will, is principally driven off of the work that will be involved, leading up into the budget, because your budgets are set off of our actuated numbers, our ACFR numbers that arrive in October, November timeframe, 26. And so the last thing and I think I speak on the part of all my colleagues as well, the last thing we as a collective want to do is do anything that would cause harm or stress to the school system. And so it's a matter of finding, again, it can't be infinity. So what is that solid number? And so where I'm at with the spring is that recognizing that the world is going to continue to spin by the time we get to the fall, to make it more predictive for the collective in budget season 28, then that's my rationale. So there's an adjustment time for if we have a number that's 6 months prior to you all starting to talk about your budget, and about 8 months prior to us talking about our budget. So it gives everybody some room to sort of flesh out needs. And again, I think it from you're a very labor-rich, labor-centric organization, and so that is, I don't envy the work, but that you all do, but I admire it, and I think if you that strategy of a 5-year a plan. And the other thing that I wanted to mention, I'm jumping all over the place, but is that over a 4 or 5 year period, is that this was last really talked about and first established in 2006. Are you freaking kidding me? And only now are we actually like that's not cool for the community at all. I think having on the regular a re-update every 4 or 5 years, that ought to be memorialized, right? So at the bottom of it, that ought to be memorialized, that folks are coming together, because it's crazy that so much time has gone by, and you know, we're kind of at where we're at. I mean, the smoothing of the 3% doesn't deny growth. It may not be the growth that is ideal, but if you go back to the 5 years prior to if you go back year 10 to year 6, back in time, what you're going to see is that 3% was a lot better than what you got back then. A lot better.
So I guess what I would also say, so these folks, these principals are meeting with us right now, and when we get their 42.5% rate, we are looking at a needs-based budget. And so every year, Dr. Castle presents a budget that is zeroed out and is balanced. But these folks also know that we are hiring less folks when people are retiring or resigning. We're not replacing them. Somebody at the top of the scale is replaced with somebody at the bottom of the scale. So we are making it work with the 42.5% and not having to come to you all and say, we've got this really, really huge need. We are just making it work based on the arrangement that we have now. I want to clarify, though, back that conversation that happened before. So let's say that the 42.5% yielded a 1% increase to the school division. Do we get 1% or we get 3% over the increase from the year before? We get 1%, right?
Yeah, it'd be a max.
So we have made it work on the 0.9 year that you talked about. We've had employees who haven't gotten raises. They've actually taken a pay cut when the health insurance rates have gone up and their salaries have been flat. We've done all of that work too.
Freeman was chair, we cut 10 positions that year to balance.
We've cut at least 10 positions just this year, just to make the budget work with the amount that you're giving us. Some of these kids that I talked about earlier, and we love to serve them, but they walk in the door. We had a friend join us just this week. That's going to cost us about $150,000. So we get 6,000, and so the math is not mathing.
Well, the maths because that's the average. So you can have 350,000 and 4,000, and so that's your spread. The 6% is average. Just to set that out there. So we're not saying that there aren't kids that require more services that have more costs and we should service them. I'm not saying that at all. Yeah.
I would like to reiterate that this conversation came up, and I'll have it noted that it was brought up that, I don't remember how many years ago you said you had school children registered or understood to be homeless at 50 or 60, and right now we're at 100 plus. The families that are on the fringes, that are scraping to get by, that are in households that were passed down to them from generations, because you can't afford to buy a house right now if you're on the fringe. If you're a single parent, you forget about it. Those people are the people that I don't want to collapse their income and cause them to become homeless or to lose their home or to be forced to move out of the city because they can't afford the tax rate because of the increase so high. And with us looking at it, again, equalization is historically the goal for the city. So equalization +1, equalization +2, so you do a little bit more. This time, at the budget session, they highlighted some severe needs. We were extremely short on our fire department to government standards. We're never gonna get the government standards because we just, we'd be at almost $2 tax rate to try to get to the quantities that we would have to hit. But knowing that we had needs in the sheriff's office, we had needs in the police department, we had needs in emergency services, we had needs in our city staff, Parks and Rec, that, you got guys that were making $10 or $12 an hour, you can't hire somebody for that. And they had been on pay freezes for a long time. So we had this huge bundle of things that we knew we had to hit and do something about, which is already impactful on the residents on the tax rate. So we were looking at, okay, so every cent or every 2 cents we spend is another 0.6 cents, whatever, 0.8 cents. But basically 50% more. So if we have to raise it 8, we gotta go 12. If we have to raise it 10, we gotta go 15.
Okay.
How could we address dire needs without exponentially growing the burden on the tax, on the resident? And part of that conversation was, we got some of the increased revenue on meals and sales tax, or meals and lodging, whatever. And I saw a thing on the news where Newport News, or Virginia Beach had like the second highest rate in the country, or whatever, or the state, at 12%, and I think we're higher than that.
12.
But the balance of that is, if you're on the fringes and you can't afford, or you can barely get by, you're not going out to eat. You're not going to a sit-down restaurant. You're not spending $100 or $200 to take your family out. That's discretionary money. It's not going to grocery store taxes. It's going out, to a restaurant. And I pay that. I have a family, a large family. We go out to eat a lot. They all go to the schools, William Perry, K. Collins, Waynesboro High School, and I got 2 more coming up through. And you guys do a wonderful job. So, part of the discussions we had with the 3%, and when I met with Dr. Castle last month, maybe we can have further discussions and build on that and say, well, maybe we don't only put a reserve on top, but we put a safety net underneath too, where if we have a down year, where for some reason assessments tank, that we don't cripple everything, that we would be willing to potentially go into debt to make sure that we don't cripple any function of government, especially our educational system. So,
Oh, sorry.
I want to let you finish your point, but I have a couple thoughts if possible.
you're good, go ahead.
No, I like what you're saying, and I feel like Diana is well versed on our side about potential opportunities of how we bring revenue. She said her and Terry worked on it on the last comp plan, so I feel like you and Diana would be good in a 2-by-2. I just want to suggest that. But also, you're talking about the families on the fringes that are in need, which I think is our focal point too, seeing the poverty level of our students. And so I take that a little, not personal, but that's a big deal to me. I don't want to see those families. I am those families. I'm a single mom. I've experienced homelessness. I grew up in public housing. I serve those families. And so we're not trying to make decisions that harm those families, because we're the ones that make sure that those families are taken care of. And I would be remiss for myself, with my own lived experience and with my background, to not speak to how incredibly important the school system is in serving those families on the fringe. So we cannot cut our nose to spite our face. So we've got to look at the balance. So if we're going to use that as the story, as the reason, let's make sure we look at the whole balance. Let's not prop poverty as a reason to cut, because we serve that.
It absolutely is, and again, I look at numbers differently, okay? So, cutting to me is less. And I understand that putting a cap on potential significant increase to address other things looks like a cut. And if it's not the percentage, if it's not 5%, when it could have been 5%, but it's only 3%, you gotta look at it as a cut. I'm merely saying that these were the discussions, the heated, impassioned discussions we had. I lived in Parkway Village Apartments. That was where I got my start, okay? As a young father with my wife and, my pregnant wife, moving into Parkway Village Apartments and starting there and then working through the city, and growing up in poverty. It's important to know that people are struggling, and I don't want to force them out. And our goal is to bring industry into the city to increase the positive effect on the residents. We can increase wages and get people to earn money and be able to work in the community. When Invista lost, or DuPont lost half of their plant and shut it down, that was a big impact where we lost hundreds of jobs. So,
Can I challenge you?
Can I add some words?
knock yourself out.
So what I've heard is that the school board is asking us, the city council, to, work in collaboration, give more time, more effort before we make a decision. And I can go for that, but I want to make sure that we as a body and specifically I'm saying city council, is that we are gonna be genuine about the effort and not just say, okay, we're gonna give more time just so we can make ourselves look better for the perception, for the visual. Because, I mean, we've been on this path to make this thing happen and make it happen as quick as we possibly can once we got all the data and all of this. And so I don't want to spend more time, more effort, and then at the back end, we still make the same darn decision.
Mr. Lee, you want to add anything to that?
Go
I
ahead.
want to make sure that we,
What were your thoughts on that?
I agree with what the vice mayor just said. If there is not a sincere effort, if we're just kicking the can, then it is a waste. We sat down with the chair and the vice chair, the vice mayor and I did, and I think April or May, and gave you our intentions that we were looking at adjusting the funding formula. And for all intents and purposes, we got no response. But tonight I hear bring in third party. Let's do 2-on-2s. Let's continue to meet. Well, where was all of that from April to tonight?
Can I
think-
clarify?
So
Can I
I'm
clarify?
disappointed somewhat. I'm not saying that I would want to close the door, but I am disappointed.
I would clarify that with that first meeting, unless there was no fruition of that until October. So October was the true first time that there was any collaboration on that, because that's when it was presented in a formal manner. And we were going to try to do more meetings, but I know not everybody could meet in later November and December due to personal things going on. And this was the first full time that we were able to collaborate together. So pushing that to maybe a proposed April 20th deadline to have those 2-on-2s and full meetings would be best served, and not kicking the can, because it gives an opportunity for our constituents to have an input. It gives a perspective that we go over all of the things that everybody talked about today. And maybe ideas and thoughts could change, maybe on your side or our side or whatever. I don't think that it is going to kick the can if we are actively trying to understand both parties and come to maybe the same or different conclusion, whatever it may be. I don't feel like that's going to be invaluable time or wasted time. I think that it would be due process to this proposed amendment and fundamental change. So I don't think it would kick the can. I would be fully invested in that. I have control of my schedule that I can make any time happen. So I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, I hear you, but for the record, anytime that the vice mayor, the mayor, the city manager, our assistant city manager for finance, the superintendent, the vice superintendent, the vice chair, and chair, when we sit down, I would consider that official. Okay, so when we met in April, I would consider that official to let you know that we are considering a change to the funding formula.
I would say that consideration and intentions are just that, when there's nothing for us to fully bake on.
I disagree,
However,
but okay.
However, I think we have spoke our piece. I think we have had all parties now at the table. Everyone's heard it. I think this will be a great time to discuss those next steps and move forward. And realizing that something is going to happen, so let's work together to make that something happen. Point blank, period. There's no need to belabor the point any further. I think we've all spoke our piece.
So the next step, I would, and I just said it to Mayor Lee, I think a deadline of April 20th, that's the third Monday in April. and that we are doing the due diligence of meeting up and having those conversations, going over all the scenarios. Does that make sense? Was that an outlier year for 2020, 2021? That would be my proposal towards you. Would my fellow,
Ms. Lipscomb, could
would
we?
you agree with that?
Well, I don't know about that date specifically, but maybe could we talk about April and see if that's a date that, if everybody can settle on a date that works for. And I can be here, but I can tell you, I'm pretty sure that's a state meeting that's around budget, so
Maybe not necessarily just a meeting, but like, hey, you're not gonna do a resolution on Monday, like, you won't.
by
due
that
diligence
date, I mean,
of-
it's hard to
yeah.
get 12 people in one place
Yes.
without some kind of polling ahead of time. So yeah, I'm fine with whatever deadline you all put on it. We'll make it happen. I'd asking to find a date that everybody can work, and I'll be here, whatever it is, but.
Who's gonna frame the process from now to then, so that we can have 2 on 2s or
Would you wanna
do
do that with
whatever,
me?
so that we're working through the process?
Yeah, I need to myself understand, I guess, clearly, outside of what's been presented, what we intend to accomplish. So I guess there should be some goals and objectives that we're trying to accomplish if we're going to
So,
do that.
if I can, I think the thing that I would, as a takeaway, right, so a next step of both parties. So I would respectfully offer for the school board, your next step would be, you have a proposal, is to offer a counter, because right now I have no idea what your baseline is. And so that would be really helpful to understand that, because again, collaboration means that we both talk to each other, we're both here with each other to say. And then the other thing too is that I'm sure we've all had friends in our lives where you say, hey, where do you want to go to eat? And they're like, well, I don't know. And you say what it is, and they're like, well, I don't want to go there. And then, well, how about this? Well, I don't want to go there. So, the collaboration means that when there's an exchange, that we're never going to get to the middle if one side stays on the shore, right? I mean, so we've got to figure that out too. And I know we'll get there.
Can I?
But, and then maybe what we could figure out just timelines, of some hard dates, and, so late April, that's where we're gonna sort of, reach an agreement, an arrangement. And then the structure of, for me, the sausage making happens in the 2x2s, because the 2x2s is like, everybody gets to collaborate and talk to everybody offline at coffee shops and all that kind of stuff. And so you do that, and then, but also respectfully and also for transparency, to have these experiences baked in from end of April to January 13th. And what is that frequency? So, if that's every month, and we kind of come back and we say, hey, we met with this, and this is what we heard. I'm just throwing out
You're
ideas,
saying
but
like continuing post-haste, like continuing that 2x2
yeah,
conversation.
because it's not it's not going to go away, and it impacts our we've got our budget to influence, which will directly impact your 28 budget, that we have to sign on to by May, June timeframe. So us getting this thing buttoned up, again, gives that predictability and understanding of, because I can't tell you the number of, again, 9 years, the number of times that, like, oh, right, hey, revenue's up, this is gonna be great, and then our sunk cost completely erodes, where health insurance went up $380,000, and X, Y, Z, that we may have $1 million increase in net revenue, but then it's gone in sunk cost immediately. So when we think about what a penny means, well, is it a penny and a half? Is it so that's where I'm at again with the April to be more clear. But yeah, so that's where we figure it out, and then we together as friends and neighbors, we figure it all out together.
So I think to Nigel's point, then, we would expect that action from you guys.
Yep.
The counter
Okay.
offer.
If I
Yes.
can, I really do need to jump in because I feel like for the record, we have to push back on the official business being conducted in 2x2 meetings. That's
No, no,
not
no,
allowed.
I did not say official
I
business
just
on
want to make
2x2s.
sure it's not even implied.
Right, no, I did not say that,
Okay.
so.
I said sausage making, so, and that's what it is. I mean, nobody wants to eat, what comes out of it, but yet you have,
You're saying
that's
it's
the,
rules, right?
Well,
That's
it's
the complicated
illegal.
stuff.
Like, we cannot conduct official business in 2x2 meetings.
So that's
And
why
your
she didn't
choice of
accept it as an
words
official offer.
your choice of words is concerning.
My choice of words
So-
did not say 2x2 official.
Yeah.
I spoke on the session that we met with the chair, the vice chair of your school board, along with the mayor and the vice mayor.
That's a 2x2
Okay.
meeting. You can't
With,
conduct official
with your,
business in 2x2.
just to alarm you, or not alarm you, but to notify you that we
You're not
intended
making
to.
it better.
Okay, whatever.
Well, go ahead.
Anyway.
I just want to make sure for the record,
Anyway,
though.
Well, go ahead.
We will wait for you to contact us with dates and how
Okay.
we're gonna set this up, what your counter offer is going to be.
So
Or
it's-
counter offer, or your alternate solution, option, whatever you want to call it.
Okay, so I am hearing that we are not going to present anything the 19th on any amendments to the formula, correct? We are going to wait until we do our due diligence with the counter or whatever conversations need to be happen for maybe a late April timeline.
what was the 19th?
I don't know, I just threw a date.
I think she's worried
You're
about the
asking
next
if we're
council
gonna have something on
Oh, you
the.
said-
Correct,
the next
that's correct.
No.
That's what I need to hear, thank you. Okay,
So we feel like when we present our counter, it should be in a public meeting, a forum as well.
so we'll put all of that in that timeline that we can bring to you guys as well for that action.
Well, I mean, and it's whatever the collective wants to do. I would just say that, the ability to, act and counteract, like, so we can go to, anyone in the room can go to the Virginia Department of Education and read, enrollment data per pupil expenditure and all that kind of stuff. And what we heard tonight was that all that's garbage. And no one in the Commonwealth of Virginia should believe it because it's not accurate, they got it wrong, they're not doing the math right. Right, so that's what we hear tonight. So if we're having a conversation where you all are proposing a thing not out of oh, well, that's interesting, let me go look into that a little bit. We just wasted a lot of time of everybody sitting in the room together, hearing about something for the first time. And unless we all want to do 30-minute recesses and everybody go get to the laptops and go do diligence real quick, which I'm fine with doing that as well. But the ability to kind of react and respond to that, I think is unproductive. So if we're gonna make it, productive, before a contracting crew comes out and works on your bathroom, they come out and they assess the state of the needs, right? Before a roof is worked on, you have somebody that comes and says, well, you might be able to get a few more years out of it, or you might need some shingle work as well.
Yeah.
So that's the purpose of the 2-on-2. Nothing can happen, no decisions can happen outside of the public eye and in full transparency. But to get that assessment and the pulse and the check about, are we gonna make a left there, are we gonna make a right there, will you.
And if we don't think that's gonna work, then why are we doing
I
it? So
think
if we
it will
don't think the
work.
2x2s are going to work, then why are we doing it?
I think if the 2x2s are flexible, if I, just to be honest and transparent, and Amber and Nigel, correct me since you handled our 2x2s, we didn't feel like there was a room for counter or for conversation in the way it was presented in 2x2s. It was more presented and this is what the will of council is and this is what we're gonna do. You guys, we asked for a public meeting, so let's be clear that we said, can the two bodies get together? You guys, we're gonna try to conduct this in a different way.
Right.
So please do not infer as if we are trying to change the conversation. You said that you didn't know about the numbers Dr. Castle gave. In those 2x2 meetings, he has told you your data is wrong. So I want to make sure we present to the public facts and not what we want it to look like. This is not new information. We have said the numbers you're using is wrong, the per pupil formula is wrong. We have
But
said
let
we
me
are
just
not gonna use
clarify, I
two by
don't know
two.
that I said that in the 2x2 meeting, because I had to go back and check it. I
But
had
have
to
you
have my
clarified
30-minute
that?
Well, and
recess.
that's the thing is, so
approach as
in
well.
in that case, so what we did in that 2x2 is that we presented
Yeah.
ADM, you know, numbers, and then you came back in today and offered a counter to it.
Yeah.
Right.
So, like you said, gave the factual information for the whole picture, which is what the goal will be.
Well, I would say perspective information.
Factual information for
Here are
the
the state
membership.
reports. Here are the state reports that support all of those numbers. So the ADM number is a traditional funding model that kids who have traditional needs that are typically developing students, those students are funded. So
Ryan, I completely believe you. You're not selling me on it. I absolutely believe you. But what I'm saying is that that's a big failure with the Virginia Department of Education's reporting, because what I heard you say this evening was that it's not materially accurate. That what I heard was the $6,000 doesn't account for grants and for other Medicaid, and it doesn't account for all those sorts of things. Show me a website where it says that on the Virginia Department of Education's website. I don't
Yeah.
read it anywhere.
That's
where I'm saying-
So to get that number, I have to find for right now, 3,013 students. And then the students with intensive support needs, I've got to go to a different report. So you're exactly right. The transparency is not there, but I go to a different report and find those 80 students that we're serving. And then that ADM number doesn't account for any of the students who are at Wayne Hills.
Right.
And so,
Or post high house.
or we're serving students from age 3 to 22. And so those kids that have graduated from Waynesboro High School, who are attending any of our post-high programs, students with significant disabilities, those aren't in your ADM numbers. So I might push back with my colleagues just a little bit. I don't know that your ADM numbers were wrong. You didn't ask us for all of the data.
Right, and that
That
has to be
goes
fixed.
with the students we're
100%.
serving. You
100%.
didn't ask us, and we didn't give you them because you relied on a state website. And I think that that's why we need to be talking more.
Yeah.
Because to say that, I think the narrative has been there that we have 300 less students, or, our enrollment's dramatically decreasing, that is not, all of the state reports, I brought the last two, and if you want them, I can go through them with you. But we're not seeing a significant decline. If anything, the needs of our students are increasing. And they're expensive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no doubt.
All the things that you're spending money on, we're having to spend money on too.
Full disclosure, the 2x2s weren't everybody getting 2x2s with everybody. I was not a part of any 2x2s.
And I think
In
that you should.
conversation,
we
we'll
should
fix
be.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, so,
We'll fix
and
it too.
2x2s would be good, because there's never a bad thing from bouncing ideas off each other.
Yeah.
Because, that's how we.
I promise
learn
not to do that for
perspectives.
pupil stuff with anybody that I meet with. I won't talk about it anymore. They've all chastised me, so I won't
I
say it
appreciate
anymore.
that. I appreciate your respectful conversation and the due diligence on both sides to have this conversation and to be adaptable, like you said, not staying on the shore and allowing that conversation to be authentic. Thank you.
Because the stuff we do too, I just want to put that out there too, just for everybody to hear. The stuff we do also benefits, right, our community as a whole. And so, if I've learned anything, I always think, know everything, and I don't know everything. But what I have absolutely learned.
You heard him say it.
Right
It's public record.
is how connected everything is. Everything is so much more connected than anybody really gets appreciation for. So when we're talking about folks in the fire department or police department or sheriff's office, clean water, 911 that responds when you pick up the phone, all of those things, economic development, growth, quality housing, options for housing, all of these things make and support the work that you all do and supports the collective community and the growth, and makes Waynesboro a great place to live, work, and play.
More affordable housing.
Yes.
Thank
So-
you, everyone.
So next steps would be for us to come back to you with a counter or our proposition for what we believe to be in the best interest, and then we come up with solid timelines and goals on behalf of both to get to that April deadline.
Correct.
Sounds good.
Molly, anything else?
No, good, thank you.
I'm
got
good
that
on
assignment,
item
Grant?
two. Do you want
I
to call
believe
for
that's my
adjournment?
assignment, is
Yes, I call for adjournment of city council. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
I have a motion, of a second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
We do have a folder of information for city council members.
You were just a regular.